Well, I'm excited to welcome Coach Jen back with me today for our part two of our three-part series, all about improving your strength by creating space. And today we're going to dive into talking about breath work and the power that breath work is, which we've definitely talked about quite a bit on the podcast, but we're going to talk about it again, share probably some new insights that maybe we haven't talked about before, and how improving your breath can help you to create more space in your body. What does that even mean? I know some of you are thinking, but don't worry, we're going to talk about it. And how can breathing better make you stronger? Again, I know we sometimes don't always correlate the two, but breathing, you guys, is super, super important. And no matter how good you think you're breathing today, I know Jen would agree with me on this because I know, at least for myself, I'll speak for myself, that I feel like I'm always improving my breathing and breathing techniques. And it is one of those things that it really is a journey. So wherever you are with your breathing, your breath practice, all of that, know that it can always, I feel like, continue to improve and get better, even if you think it's absolutely amazing today. So I'm excited to get started. We're going to first talk about the biomechanics of breathing. So when we are talking about how to breathe, I think this is a very important piece of this conversation because there are so many ways we are taught to breathe. And I don't think there's any wrong way to breathe per se, but I'm going to teach you all and talk about the way that I see is the best way to breathe because so many times we're working on aches and pains. We've got pelvic floor dysfunction, diastasis recti, whatever it might be. So when we want to actually think about how are we breathing, we really want to make sure we're stimulating our diaphragm. And again, I know I did an episode a while back just specifically calling out diaphragmatic breathing, but I'm going to share it again here. And so many times we've been taught that diaphragmatic breathing is belly breathing. And again, nothing wrong with belly breathing. It can be really great to just release and relax through your body because we hold so much tension in our body. So again, nothing wrong with belly breathing. But if we really want to breathe effectively to really tap better into our fascial system, improve our pelvic floor function, help us to get out of aches and pains, and so on and so forth, this piece is very, very, very important. So we want to really think about our breath going down and out into our rib cage and into our back. So you can think of it as like the back of your rib cage or all the way down to your low back. And again, I can't I can't tell the amount of times that I've told someone you need to breathe into your back. And they were like, gosh, I've never had someone tell me that I should be breathing into my back. I didn't even know I could breathe into my back. And sometimes in the beginning, you can't breathe into your back. You're like, that is so foreign for your brain to try to connect and figure out. And that's okay. Again, like I kind of started this conversation with, we all have to just start with where we are today with our breathing practice, with our movement practice, with whatever is going on in our body. So if we're thinking about our breath, that breath needs to be going down out into the rib cage and into the back of our rib cage, even down into our low back. And when we do that, we're really stimulating diaphragm. We're going to really start to fill up our entire lungs, but we're also going to start to wake up a lot of fascia in our body, right? Those of you that have listened to me talk about fascia through lots of episodes, we're just a reminder that fascia wraps around all of our organs. And so many times we can get really focused on our muscular system. The fascia, yes, wraps around our muscles, wraps around every muscle spindle, but think about everything that's inside of your rib cage, everything that's inside of your torso, from your pelvis to basically your shoulders. Well, how can we tap into that better? Well, it's through breath work. It's amazing the amount of things that can start to shift for your body. And I don't want to spill all the good news right here because Jen and I have a lot more to talk about. But just bringing awareness to the fact that, gosh, if we can expand our breathing and really start to breathe and expand our ribs out to the sides and breathe in to our back, then we start to really open up so much potential, unlock so much potential for our body. Something else that we're starting to do is we're creating more actual physical space in our body. Because if we were previously not breathing into our ribs, breathing into our back, then there's probably not a lot of movement happening in that area of our body, right? So that area can become stagnant and restricted. We can get buildup of fascia, all sorts of things, right? And we're also just not oxygenating our body in here as well. So when we can start thinking about breathing down, so I want everyone to practice this. You can do this if you're walking, if you're sitting, driving, whatever you're doing, just don't be too distracted. Is I want you to breathe in through your nose and visualize that breath going down towards your diaphragm, out to your ribs and into your back. And just pay attention to what you feel in your body. Does that feel really easy for you? Do you notice you just want to belly breathe? Do you notice your shoulders rise up to your ears? Or you kind of like round your body forward, which is very common, and that's okay because we tend to breathe very shallow up into just our chest, right? And then our shoulders go up and we wonder why we have headaches or tension in our neck, all of that. And I'll tell you, when we learn to breathe better, we can start to get rid of the aches and pains. So many of them, but specifically that neck tension starts to go away when we start to realize, oh gosh, we need to actually open up across our sternum, right? So it's like right above our chest, those intercostal muscles up here on the upper part of our ribs. If we want to think about just opening up through there, letting our shoulders relax, you guys, we try to do too much with our shoulders, and it's like we're forcing our body to breathe deeper and we're becoming more tense with our breath. And that's the opposite of what we want, especially our inhale of our breath to do. Our inhale should really kind of open and release and relax more through our body, to create more expansion, creating more actual physical space through the body, space between the bones, space for our tissue, and all of that fluid in the body, and so on and so forth. So that creating of space. So something else I want to make sure to mention, we're talking about like the actual biomechanics of how we're breathing and the importance of it, is that proper diaphragmatic breathing works together with our pelvic floor. And we have lots of pelvic floor conversation on this podcast too, but to really understand that for proper effective pelvic floor function, we have got to do it through breath work. That is really the best way. Now, I will teach it with movement because that can really help our brain get out of old patterns. So I love teaching pelvic floor stimulation, deep core stimulation with gentle movement. But guess what? It's all facilitated by breath work. So no matter what the movement is you're doing, we can be forcing the movement, gripping and grabbing our muscles and thinking we're doing it right because we feel it, when actually you may be working against your body completely because we're not allowing the breath, especially that exhale, to gently connect the pelvic floor and lift. Because when we inhale, you guys, when you inhale, think about this, right? The diaphragm is going down towards the pelvis. The pelvic floor is going to expand downward a little bit. Then when we exhale, this is why I teach breath the way that I do, you guys. For everyone that's listening that always feels like that you're like, Erica, I'm backwards on my breathing. This is the exact reason why eventually I want you to do the breath the way that I teach you. Sometimes in the beginning, it's hard because it feels very, very foreign to our body, but that exhale to help to stimulate that gentle pelvic floor lift up through the body is because that's what the body naturally does. So I have no idea when or how, and Jen, if you have anything to chime in on this, like when or how the breath got taught backwards, I have no idea. And again, I know there can be times and places to teach the breath the opposite direction, but what we're here to do is help to teach optimal function of the body. So that breath really, really, really matters. And if we think it doesn't, well, it's wrong. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're wrong. I'm just going to call it out because breath is everything. And I will tell you, in my 20 years of teaching, I wish I was taught that breath was more important in the beginning. And I'll tell you, in fitness, like you were taught to cue a certain way or whatever, but it was probably really Pilates for me that taught me more about the breath, because we were taught like you inhale and exhale with certain moves, you maybe reverse it for another purpose, things like that. And then over the years, I started really, really understanding how important that breath is for pelvic floor function, for creating space in our body. And that creating of space is so important because at the end of the day, and if you guys haven't listened to our part one episode that we did last week, go back and listen to that because we talked a lot about creating space, becoming stronger with the actual physical movement. And this is like a deeper layer that tacks on with that movement piece. So, okay, I'm going to wrap up my I'll keep talking. Jen's over here like, I'll just keep talking and talking and talking. So let's move on to Jen's going to talk about our visual practice with breath. And this, you guys, is phenomenal, and this can shift so much for your body. So take it away, Jen.
Well, I can tell you I'm very relaxed right now because all I've been doing is focusing on my breath as you've done that. And I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm zen. Um, but so now let's add in this piece of where you're in your mind. So start with, let's make it super simple. Start with just visualizing where that breath is going. And sometimes we'll have members in our program who they really have a hard time quieting that monkey chatter, as Erica likes to call it, in the mind, and just focusing on the breath, right? The whole part of like meditation is you focus in on the breath, but it's never to have your mind clear of all the thoughts. You just want to turn your thoughts more to the breath. So sometimes we'll tell people pick a color. So it's actually one thing I did with Erica. I was with a group of women in one of her programs, and she's like, just pick a color for your breath. And then watch that color like a cloud go in and see where it goes. And there it was on one call where I realized my breath was stuck at the top, like up at my chest. It was not dropping down into my ribs. And so she just had you work through that. And then you could see the stuck was, there could be a lot of reasons for being stuck, but I could see it was, I had tension in my shoulders just from stuff that had happened that day. And so you work on moving that color or your breath down deeper and deeper. And we tell you, try to get your breath down into the pelvic floor. Now, we all know where your lungs are. So like physically, you're not getting your breath into your pelvic floor, but you are opening up that space from the top of your shoulders all the way down out into those ribs laterally and down into that pelvic floor, definitely creating the space. And then when you visualize it more, you can see where that breath is going or is not going. And that helps you work with it a little bit deeper. Then we'll take you to like level 2. And now we want to visualize you breathing with the movement. So for me, and Erica worked a lot on this with me. After I'd had my last baby, I had a botched knee surgery a week later. Like, I don't know what that surgeon did, but it was not right. And I could not get my knee to function. And I've spent 25 years rehabbing other people's knees. Like, how come this isn't working for me? So she had me, while I couldn't move it, visualize me actually moving it. And it reminded me of when I used to help work with patients who were either paraplegic or else they would get a new limb. So they lost one of their limbs and they're getting on why can't I think of the name of it all of a sudden? It's not an orthotic device. They're getting a
Uh, uh, prosthetic.
prosthetic. Yes.
Prosthetic.
And your body doesn't work right away with those things. It's not a happy marriage right away. And so one thing we do is called mirror therapy. We literally put a mirror down the half of their body and we let the good limb move. Well, their brain sees two limbs in that mirror. And so if it's their right limb that's not working, we have them do the movement with their left limb and the brain starts to think it's the right side doing. So it gets that visualization of, oh, my right side can do this, and people start to progress a lot faster. The same thing comes if I want to be able to loosen up my low back and I'm working on a simple rotation. Breathing with a rotation is huge because you get the movement, you get the tightening down of the twist, but you also get that length in it. And if you try to move and you're stuck somewhere, well, just as you're doing it, start visualizing your body opening up just a little bit farther each time. And you'll notice after doing like 5 times on each side, you've gotten a little bit farther. Same thing with a squat. If you want to squat better, visualize the proper movement of that squat and where you need to get, and you can do it. And that's going to get you stronger, better, faster. Stronger, better, faster, whatever you want to say. But it's more efficient to do your movement practice with the breath and visualizing where that breath and what those muscles and your body are doing. It's huge. And it also helps you. So let's go. So Erica asked a minute ago, where did breath get turned around? And I was like, I don't know. But then I started thinking, one big thing that is taught, especially for power lifters, is, and this was taught for me in education, was the Valsalva maneuver, which is where you hold your breath and then you exert your force. So you'll see a power lifter with a weight belt on and they've got all that weight. They hold their breath, so they're pushing into their belly and down into their pelvic floor, which is the complete opposite motion we want to do. And so then my brain started to spiral. Well, what if we started teaching power lifters to actually exhale and pull everything in like a proper tight girdle and not like a weight belt? And I won't give my side opinion on weight belts, but like how much stronger could we really make these power lifters? Because now we're not forcing the breath, we're not forcing the movement. We're using that visualization of, okay, I've got 800 pounds on my back. I'm going to breathe that bad boy right back up, right? Because now I've got my pelvic floor lifting me. I've got my deep core, my transverse properly protecting my spine. I got this. It can move. So with that visualization of seeing myself move that weight and breathing that actual visualization into reality, you're, I mean, just think where you could go with that. Just try that. Bring your breath and visualizing your movement into your movement practice today, and just see how much better that movement practice goes today. Like, I'm excited just thinking about it right now. And then another big thing, if you're working for strength, for movement, for increased range of motion, breathing deep and focusing on where that breath goes helps release stagnation that gets stuck in our fascia and in the tissues. You just, if you've come from sitting all day, a really stressful day at work, or here, I'll just take you through my yesterday without telling you. With my children yesterday, it was like everything just started to squish in me. But when I was like, okay, wait, this isn't working, my reaction isn't working, and I stopped and I just breathed. That was all I did. I just sat and I just took inhales and exhales. And then I visualized my reaction going better and the day going better. It completely changed it. But I moved all those feelings of frustration of dealing with a very defiant 3-year-old out of my body because I let the emotions go. I can only be in control what I can be in control of. And that was me. Instead of thinking I can control this very free-willed 3-year-old. And so with that breath, I moved everything through and it completely changed things and reset things, which perfectly ties into where Erica is going next.
Yeah, well, I wanted to add to that with the whole kids situation or stressful situations. I don't want to get us too off track, but I feel like this is a really good reminder for everybody that a lot of times things that are happening around us can be a reflection of within ourselves. So the more that, like Jen said, you have control over what you have control over, but we don't have control over everything. But if you can learn to calm within yourself and calm your nervous system, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit more about here in a minute, is when we can reflect within ourselves, we can help to shift that situation that's happening. And again, may not change the way the 3-year-old acts per se, but if the 3-year-old doesn't get a rise out of her mom when she's acting a certain way, then maybe she'll be like, oh, this isn't worth it anymore, or whatever the situation is, right? And that is something with my kids, I wish I would have learned a lot sooner when they were little, and I didn't realize that till they were, I mean, they were, I don't know what age, but a little older anyway. They weren't like 2 or 3 years old kind of thing. And when you start to realize that, then you can shift so much within your day, even if it's not going the way you want, you can breathe through it and help to shift stuff within yourself. So, okay, so when we're talking nervous system per se, right? We've a lot of you probably know about your vagus nerve, right, which connects from your digestive system and your brain. And so this is where we can have the conversation of if you are living in a lot of stress, you can have digestive issues. And sometimes that's really hard for people to understand. But when I work with clients one-on-one and do a deep dive into their health, I can tell you stress matters. And we can take all the right supplements, do the right movement. But if we don't work on our stress for our brain, that can be a sticking piece that prevents you from getting stronger, getting healthier, having more energy, being happier, all the things. And it can be easier said than done, of course, but just recognizing that it is a true thing. And so, what is one thing that we can do to help us to shift so that we don't feel so much stress? And well, breath can help to facilitate a lot of it. It may not be the only piece that you need, but just understanding how powerful breath can be. And Jen hit on a lot of really good things and is the visual practice. I recommend to every single one of you, if you don't do visual practice with your breath, start trying it, experiment with it. I know some people have a hard time going there because you're like, I don't see anything, I don't feel anything. Your body starts to want to fight it. And that right there, if that is anyone listening that feels that way, that's okay. We have to take the judgment away from all of this, right? When, Jen and I are here to teach and educate, and it's one of those things where we can't make the change within our body or for our life or our HPA axis, which is like the stress piece of our brain, if we aren't first aware that we are trying to force things. We are trying to be in control of things that we actually need to kind of let go of, or I don't know, the word surrender comes up a lot of times. I feel like we have to okay, we've got to not force our body to try to make these changes. We instead have to work with our body. And so if you are someone who has a really hard time visualizing as you're breathing or even feeling or any of it, because your body, you almost feel like maybe there's a little anger that comes up. We don't talk a lot about anger, especially for women, I feel like, but this it's a real thing, it's a real feeling, there's nothing wrong with it, but recognizing whether it's if there's are feelings coming up that you're like, I've been trying to shove those deep inside for a very, very long time, because we all have things in our life that have, you could look at them, I don't love to talk about quote traumas, but it can, the thing is we have to realize is sometimes the littlest things we can be holding on to, and we need to learn to start to let go of those things. And this is where breath can be really, really, really amazing, but it can also be a little icky. And sometimes we have to be willing to, again, the word surrender kind of comes up for me. If this is something you guys are wanting to work on and improve your breath, improve your movement, get out of pain, get out of dysfunction, this is a huge piece that can keep people stuck if you're not willing to work on letting go of old junk that is hanging around within your nervous system, in your tissue, right? There's research. We know I did a episode. This is one I probably should link up to. This would be a good one for you guys to listen to. It's been a long time since I did it. I remember talking about a deeper dive kind of in this conversation about the nervous system on a deeper level and the emotion we hold in tissue. We now know, from research that that is true. And there will be some people that say, oh, that's not really true. Whatever. Here's the deal. I've worked with enough people and enough women in particular that there is definitely some element of truth to that. So I would tend to at least I love that there's a little bit of research that backs that up, because when we start to move our body, we start to get that stagnation out of our body. We start to challenge our body and stop it from always being in a fight or a flight system, right? So many of us are living in fight or flight 100% of our day. And we don't even realize it till we start to do some of this practice. And then we start to realize, oh gosh, I'm so tense. I'm holding. And you guys, if you're holding up in your neck and your traps and all that, and you breathe up high in your body, there's a really good chance you are really restricted through your pelvis and your pelvic floor. Because I see it all the time. Other than the fact that if you're tense in your upper body and to tell me that your pelvic floor is too weak or whatever, I don't buy it. Because if our nervous system is heightened, we are in fight or flight most of the time. What does the body do? And a good example is if your body is in pain, just because pain is a physical thing that we can talk about. If your body is in pain, what happens? Do you feel relaxed and or do you feel you tense and you tighten up? But that's what happens with pain. This is something where I have moved away from using a really hard foam roller. I'm actually re-videoing and I want to refilm that stuff, because the problem with it, I get everyone using my soft heel ball or a soft foam roller because you can initially get a little release. It can feel like it's releasing, but what I actually see is it actually tightens it back up. Because what happens if we're just trying to roll that tight tissue of like a quad, for example, right? But it leaves you in tears. What's the point of it? Did that benefit you at all because it's so painful? No, no, it just heightened your nervous system even more, sent you more into fight or flight. So this is where I've seen over the years when we shift and we know from a research perspective that fascia likes to be worked gently. This is my segue back into breath. I know I can get off on tangents, but sometimes it just kind of flows. And I'm like, we need to hear it, even if you've heard it before. But fascia likes gentle, you guys. Breath. Breath should be so gentle for our body. And guess what? When you start to be more gentle with yourself, kinder to yourself from an emotional, mental perspective, and like, hey, let me kind of surrender to some of the stuff that's coming up. Maybe I just need to let this junk out of my body in a very safe manner. Maybe this is something where, even though I want whatever that goal is, right, to get stronger, to get out of pain, to all the things, like that's going to happen for you. But sometimes we get in our own way and it can be our own nervous system. And we have to kind of hack our nervous system. And one way of really helping to do that is with our breath. When we slow down, this is where, like, going back to last week's conversation, part one, we talked about slower movement. Now, let's tie that breath in with slower and gentle movement, doing soft ball work, soft foam roller work. It's amazing to me that when I have someone do the gentle, ball work up against the wall. And again, to me, I know it feels like you're doing nothing. And I hear it all the time. People are like, okay, Erica, this is literally doing nothing for me. They're like rolling on a ball with their ribs and their low back. And I'm like, you know what? Just do it nice and slow. I want you to visualize your breath going into where you're rolling that ball. This is also why the ball stuff works so well. It's a tactile cue. Our body loves tactile cues, you guys. It's phenomenal. So it's not really the ball so much doing the work. It's doing a little bit. You're getting some of that like gentle rubbing of the tissue, but it's that breath. You're breathing deeper now into those ribs because now your brain knows, oh, that's where my breath should be going. You're moving slow. We're not trying to force you to make any connections or turn anything on. We just want you to learn how to breathe better. So again, any of you listening, some of you have done this. I know those of you that haven't, get my small teal ball. Just get it. Always start against the wall, you guys, because if you got any sort of rib stuff, we don't want stuff taken off on you by going on the floor. So always, always start against the wall first. Again, you're going to feel like you're doing nothing. That is very normal. But do the one side. Just go start on one of your sides and roll from like your lower back, lower ribs, mid back, upper back, the whole side. Very slowly. You're going to take a couple minutes to do this on one side. Then I want you to step away from the wall and I want you to breathe and visualize your breath going, like we talked about. Go back to the beginning of this episode if you need to listen to it again, but breathe into that area. What do you feel? 100% of the time, you guys, I hear people say, yeah, I can breathe a little bit deeper. And you know what? Even if you only feel like you can breathe 1 or 2% more, which it's going to be more than that, but even if it's only a tiny, tiny bit more, think about what happens in time when we practice that on a regular basis and we start to open up our breath. We're slowing down a little bit. We're calming our nervous system just by doing that. And that's where we see the ball work. I'm always saying, well, do more ball work, because we're so stuck in fight or flight. We're stuck in having to feel the burn, really making our muscles work. And there's a time and a place for that, because yes, I am all about getting people's right muscles and right connections on, because I don't want to like go against that conversation, but we also have to do this balance of it as well. And so when we can improve our breathing, it is amazing how much our health starts to improve. We start to get better results. We can get stronger more effectively and stronger instead of feeling like we're pushing this boulder up a hill. We work on getting our body aligned better. We can now breathe so much better. Our pelvic floor deep core connection can improve because we've learned how to breathe better without forcing it. And that is huge. Jen, you want to talk about pain just for a minute? And then I think we'll wrap up here.
Yeah, I think this is a little secret hidden piece of breath that a lot of people don't realize. I learned it early on in my athletic training years. I mean, let's go extreme. Let's say someone breaks their femur. That's a lot of pain. Like, it's a lot, and it's immediately going to put you into that vagal response, like your fight, your flight, or your full out freeze. But what I've learned that is if I can get my athlete, myself, or my kids to slow down their breathing, your pain is going to decrease right with it. Because when you are in that stress response, when your nervous system is fully heightened, when you are breathing quickly due to pain or fear, every nerve ending in your body is switched on, which means you're going to feel everything so much more. With the breath, when you calm that nervous system, that heightened response to all the nerve endings goes away. It doesn't go away, it decreases, and your pain will decrease with it. So if you can just breathe, if you're in pain, if you are hurting, just stop and breathe. That's why, with like, think about it, when you go to that's why Lamaze came about. You breathe through the process and you take that heightened sense away, and it calms everything and decreases your pain. So you can push through the most difficult thing you're ever going to have to do. Um, it's the same thing with just as simple as a kid scraping their knee or somebody getting an injection. I've had athletes where I've had to help the doctor. I mean, we're talking like professional athletes where I've had to hold them for the doctor to get a needle in. But if I can get in their face and get them to breathe with me and just focus with me, and even if I touch where the needle's going to go, I now overstimulate all those nerves. So the minute I take my finger away, if they're breathing, this section, the nerves are decreased. So they feel the needle less, they feel the pain less, they're good to go. So breath work is magical because it can change, it can shift everything in your body.
Oh yeah, I'm always if I get an IV or have to get blood drawn, I go inward, I close my eyes, I go inward and focus on my breathing. And it is phenomenal. And it's obviously with kids too, any needles or anything, same thing. And I know I've mentioned this for with breath, but you know, teaching your kids some elements of this because when they're little, they breathe so well. You guys, it gets lost as life happens. We get injured, stress, sit too much, all the things. But all have this ability to breathe better, and it can just be the piece that unlocks so much for you to feel more energetic, for you to become stronger faster, to help your alignment, to help your decrease your stress, help to get you out of fight or flight. All the things. It's absolutely incredible. So, Jen, any last things to add? Okay, we covered a lot today. This was awesome, you guys. As always, share today's episode with a couple friends. If you didn't listen to our last week's conversation, part one, we talked more about improving your strength and creating space with movement. Definitely go back and listen to that because this was kind of a deeper conversation that breathwork can help you with all of that movement. Next week, we will be back with part three, which I cannot wait to share all of that with all of you. And as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can always reply to any of my emails that you may receive. You can find me on Instagram at Erica Zeal. And if you have not yet signed up for my free pelvic floor guide, be sure to get that. I know it definitely is a pelvic floor focus, but no matter if you're dealing with pelvic floor dysfunction, incontinence, back pain, neck pain, diastasis recti, or you're like, hey, I don't have any issues, but this is kind of interesting and I would like to learn about prevention, go sign up for that pelvic floor guide because there's a lot of great information in there. And this breath stuff we talked about, there's elements of that in there as well because, well, we got to put all the pieces together. So head on over to my website, ericazeal.com/pelvic floor, and I'll see you guys back next week.